Lovely to see you, Bern, and thanks for making some time today.
Thanks for inviting me.
No worries. What a year it's been. It's been a unique year, hasn't it, for everyone?
Yeah, it's been a huge year, extremely challenging.
Yes.
But I think there's also been some major positives that have come out, and I think a lot of people are saying that now.
It's true. It's a good perspective. I was rewinding back. We were just talking before around back in February when we were first having conversations around the Road Trauma Support Services strategy.
Yeah.
And it might be good just to understand a bit more for the viewers watching this of what Road Trauma Support Services do.
Okay.
I know I've learned so much personally from yourself, the leadership team, your clients and your partners, and what you really do. So it'd be great just to hear a bit more about that.
Sure. Yep. So Road Trauma Support Services Victoria is a statewide service, and basically our aim is to reduce the incidence and impact of road trauma. So we provide counselling to anyone who's been impacted by any sort of road incident. There's no eligibility for criteria for people to engage with our service. They can just ring and call us. So that's everyone from witnesses and first on scene to people who are bereaved as a result of road trauma, as well as offending drivers. The service is free and it's unlimited. So there's really, there are no factors that would necessarily preclude someone from contacting us. And we also have an education branch when our largest education program is the Road Trauma Awareness Seminars, where we get the majority of our referrals through the Department of Community Corrections and the Magistrates Court. So they're people who have been referred to do a driver's course as part of their charges for a road offence. Right. And then we do a variety of sort of community education sessions, and depending on what the need is for the for the person that's organised it.
Yeah, it's. I know the window that we've had learning about your organisation through the strategy partnership we've had. One thing that has really stood out to me that you see across the Victorian community, you see a perspective from all different views and areas, both from people that are victims of road trauma, but also the offenders. So you see that real unique mix of situations, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And the organisation was founded 26 years ago, and one of the co-founders, her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend were killed by a drunken, drug-affected driver. But regardless of the circumstances, she was really determined to create a program that was non-judgmental and that welcomed everybody in. And we really do see all sides. So we work closely with people in counselling who are preparing to go to court and face jail time, as well as their families. So there's always a wide range of people that we see.
Yeah, it's huge. And your role, as I understand, so you've been with the organisation quite a while. Before the CEO, you were the manager of counselling services?
Yeah, so I started in January 2012 as manager of counselling and support. And at the beginning of 2019, the CEO position was up and I went for it, and thankfully I got it, which was good.
Well, we've seen the way you operate and your team and the community, and I know it's a very unique, having the background of the counselling manager, understanding really at the heart of what the organisation does. From my perspective, is a huge difference. And some other organisations that perhaps float a CEO in, but perhaps haven't seen the on the ground experience. So we've seen that the understanding the community is a huge thing.
And that's why I went for the position predominantly, because I felt that I really knew the organisation really well, and I had a good understanding of our community, the people that engaged with us.
Yes.
So I think they were my strengths going for the job. I certainly had to build up my business knowledge, hence why I got people like Poundstone.
Yeah, very good. It's and now rewinding to the start of this year. We've talked about what a unique year it's been. So we were having conversations with you around February time, or January, February time, wasn't it?
Yep.
Around, road trauma support services strategy and where you were looking to head in the next 12 months, the next 3 years. And can you talk a bit about, perhaps how you've done strategy in the past, and the good things about that, and perhaps the learnings you've had before that engagement?
Yeah, sure. Look, I guess like a lot of organisations, it was what I probably would call a traditional approach to developing a strategic plan. So typically it was your big one-day workshop with as many staff members as you could get in.
Yes.
And we'd have an external facilitator, and we'd thrash around ideas and thoughts about where we thought the organisation needed to go.
Yep.
And then we'd write up a very high-level plan, and it would sit in our G drive and no one would pretty much look at it. And I found over the years that whilst I've been a part of the process and that's the way it was, I walk away feeling, what does that actually give us on the ground here? What are we working with to move forward? So that wasn't what I wanted to do this time. As much for me as it was for the rest of the staff, but also for our internal and external stakeholders, including clients, that they really get that. I guess they're encouraged by the fact that we mean what we say we're going to do, and that we have that conviction to it.
Yes. Yeah, it's. I mean, the way you've described that, and it's not a. We've been involved in those kind of strategy engagements in the past, definitely, and there's a time for those, isn't there, to have the offsite with the team and internally with the board, yourself and your team. I think the element, perhaps the hope that was perhaps a bit different, was the human-centred design element.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact that you drove a lot of that, or most of that, was, let's start the strategy with having a conversation around, your partners.
Yeah.
So with the likes of TAC, as I understand, Vic Police.
Yeah.
To really understand, what was happening in their world, what were they thinking, what were they seeing out there, what were they feeling. And I suppose it was probably even more amplified because of COVID, wasn't it? Because there was such a change in our community at the time and such unknowns.
Definitely. And I think even before we got to talk to those bigger external stakeholders, one of the things that really struck me when we did have the opportunity to meet face-to-face with a lot of the education team was really looking at the client journey. And breaking that down and even looking at the before they engage with us.
Yes.
So before they're involved in any sort of road incident or commit a crime on the road or anything like that. So I guess just looking at it from a client's point of view in those very early days gave me confidence that we were on the right track.
Yes.
And then with the human-centred design, I think initially I felt a little bit hesitant having the conversations with the stakeholders because I think part of me was thinking, where is this going to go and what are people going to say? And I think that the thing that struck me the most, Andrew, was that our stakeholders had so much to say and they hadn't necessarily been given that opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
Having said that, when I started as CEO, I sent out a survey to our key stakeholders just to get a bit of a picture. But having these rich conversations with them, and I know we had to do them all over Zoom.
Yeah, we did. It was we had some pretty senior formal people in their lounge rooms having cups of tea.
That's right, dogs coming in with kids. But I think that's been the way.
Yes, that's right.
But I think it also really enhanced that human element to it. So we were able to have very relaxed conversations.
Yes.
And what surprised me out of there must have been 30 plus hours, was the number of opportunities that people came up with in those conversations. The number of genuine ideas and opportunities for collaboration that came up as a result of those conversations. And quite frankly, for want of a better word, I was quite gobsmacked. I was excited, a little bit overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Thinking, how are we going to do all this? But at the same time, it was invigorating. And I think if we look at when we started to do that at the beginning of lockdown, it was really important for me as the CEO to not drop the ball on this. I thought it was probably a good time to start bringing people together because we were all feeling quite isolated because we had to work from home.
So yeah, if we rewind back to February, March when, we're all gone into lockdown, I remember the conversation with you, and a number of other customers were saying, let's put everything on hold. It has to stop. I remember the conversation with you. You said, no, this is a time now we have to really engage with your own team, as well as your partners and clients and volunteers. And you were very clear that was really important to continue those conversations.
Yeah.
So that probably comes innate to you. Is there any, when you think about that time, what was perhaps your reactions back then?
Look, I think probably my initial reaction was I was quite nervous. I was worried about the organisation. We had to, I don't know, the sort of, the word of the day at the moment is pivot.
Yeah.
We had to pivot, and we did. I was extremely proud of our organisation, and particularly in the early days, the education team managing to get our biggest education program from face-to-face to online.
Yeah, it was huge.
And they had a month to do it. So, it was remarkable, really, what we were able to do. And also with the counselling team being able to say, basically, okay, we work from home and we offer telephone and Skype. So we kept the momentum going.
Yes.
And I think that was really important. We knew we had to move quickly. And I was determined to keep us connected. And I thought, well, I think we can do this by developing this, having these strategic conversations.
Yeah. And
what it did was, in those early days particularly, it really brought the staff and the organisation together. And it prompted further connection over the months. So basically it meant that I was meeting with the education team more than I ever have. I was meeting with the volunteers more than I ever had because we're located right across the state.
Yes.
We're often not in the same space.
Yes.
So having those opportunities, so I'm really glad we made the decision that we did to keep it going, because I think in conjunction with COVID, it helped us maintain the momentum and also the connections that we needed to be able to adjust to being isolated.
Yeah, and Bern, you probably look at that as everyone did that. I don't think that was the case. It takes a conviction to do that. And a connection to where you're heading. So I think that was huge.
Yeah.
And I think what I saw with the conversations with your partners, they seemed to get a lot of value out of that. It wasn't just road trauma support saying tell us this so we can use for our strategy. It really, the way I saw it, you were connecting some of the dots for them and providing value in those conversations. They might have not heard what was happening in a different partner or a different space. So you were raising what you'd heard in a previous conversation that might have been valuable to them. Yeah. So did you see you saw those connections forming over those conversations?
Definitely. I'll be honest, starting with that blank page and no set questions.
Yes. It can be a bit wacky at times,
it's a little bit scary.
Yes.
But it was fabulous because there wasn't an agenda. The only agenda was really looking at, as we've discussed many times, what are people saying, what are people hearing, and what are their thoughts?
Yes.
And leaving it as open as it was, even though, as I say, I found it a little bit confronting at first.
Yes.
It goes back to what I said before. I was really surprised at what people had to say.
I think that's the main thing with humans in design. When you do leave that unbiased and blank page approach, it does open it probably more to a structured survey. The surveys are fantastic in their own right, aren't they?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Focus groups. but it does seem to open up, and you'll uncover areas where perhaps your client, your partner never probably thought of themselves until you had the conversation.
Definitely.
And then those things come up, and then, oh, I didn't think of that, and then you go down that path for a bit.
And people were very open to just giving their opinions and their thoughts and talking to us in a very informal way, but looking at using language, have you thought about doing this? Those sorts of things, and really getting us to think about everything that, or all the things that maybe we didn't know we were missing.
Yeah.
And I think that was pretty exciting too.
I think it takes a lot of courage to have those conversations as well, doesn't it? Because perhaps the traditional mandate in organisations and corporate is that I have to have all the answers. And and I can relate to that. Sometimes, you're speaking to a customer and you feel like you have to have the answers. But we're seeing the beauty of the design thinking approach, for me anyway, and hopefully yourselves, was that, you as a CEO don't have to sit there and say, I have all the answers.
Yeah.
Because no one really does, do they?
No. Look, it probably took me 18 months as a CEO to give myself permission not to have all the answers.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think I know that going through the strategic planning process certainly helped me with that.
Right.
And certainly working with you and Alan helped me with that. Really allowing myself to listen to other people and myself differently in a way where you're inviting.
Yes.
You're inviting the conversations and that are so fruitful, really.
Yep.
And not feeling pressure that I had to do it all, which was great.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah,
between
definitely.
setting the direction with your team and then giving the open space for them to contribute as well.
Definitely, yeah.
And how did you find the approach? So then when you were having the conversations with your partners and things were coming up that you both hadn't seen before, which is a good thing. We did some of the customer journey map. You were saying that perhaps the before the awareness stage was the things that came up. How did you see that then, and then working with your board and your team? How did you see that process unfolding and getting them involved? Did you find that valuable?
Yeah, I certainly from a staff perspective. First off, they were very involved and very keen because they were taking part in different conversations depending on who we were talking to.
Yes.
They saw the benefits and the things that were coming up in the conversations with external stakeholders, but also our internal ones. And I remember the couple of the conversations we had with volunteers.
Yeah.
These are people who have been impacted by road trauma, talking about their experience, but talking about what they think. We could be working on and with them on.
Yes.
So the staff were just as invested as I was, and I'm extremely fortunate to have an amazing group of people to be working with. And the board too, they really embrace this. And it is a different way of working on strategy for a lot of people.
It is.
But I guess what I did to keep them involved was each board meeting I'd give them an update on who we talked to, sent them the great summaries of conversations that we had with our partners and our stakeholders. And then we had that fabulous session with them. But they were already up to speed by then.
Yeah.
And they
do you think that
had
was
ownership.
Yes.
So they bought in. And I think that was really
So do you think that was part of the difference when you keep people involved, both your team and both your partners and board? It is a different dynamic to the conversation then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And I think from a board perspective, I needed them to feel a part of it, and I wanted them to buy into the process, but the conversations.
Yes.
So when we got to the board, we didn't have any preconceived ideas about what we wanted to get out of that conversation. It was again just really getting their thoughts
Yeah.
And, you know, what they were seeing and feeling and, you know, all of those sorts of things. That made a massive difference.
It's so subtle, the intent, isn't it? You know, sometimes,
absolutely.
you know, I've been there, if you're going into a conversation and you want a specific outcome, a mandate for that, within reason, but then if you go into those conversations with saying, this is what we're seeing and hearing, and these are some of the insights that we've come across, what does that resonate with you? Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, definitely.
It tends to change the whole energy, doesn't it, of the whole piece. So.
Absolutely. And they had so much information along the way that they were able to see some of the directions and some of the opportunities that were presenting themselves in these conversations. So by the time we had that big meeting with them, where we were really looking for their engagement and their feedback, they'd already bought in. So it worked beautifully. And I didn't have an agenda of, I really want the board to go this way or that way. I needed them to feel comfortable with where we were at. And work with me. Not either way.
That's a good way to put it. And did you find that then it can change the dynamic? You know, the simplicity of it is you're listening to your clients, your partners, your volunteer community, genuinely listening to what's happening in their world, and it's really then relaying that information to the broader organisation and community, as opposed to, you know, corralling it in just a certain direction, isn't it? You're relaying all the truths that you're hearing, and you're saying, what are you seeing here?
Definitely. And what we didn't do was we didn't try and summarise all those conversations and all the good stuff that came out of it into a banner. Eventually, we developed the goals and the perspectives of where we wanted to go, but it was so free-flowing that anyone could contribute at any point in time and feel like they had some ownership. And everyone was convicted to that set of conversations, if that makes sense.
It does, which makes a huge shift when it's as opposed to a plan and a strategy saying it's signed off, we're doing it, as opposed to you being involved in creating it. It's a different feeling, isn't it?
Different, very different.
Yeah. And can you tell us a bit, because I think a lot of organisations can learn from the way road trauma support services go about what you do in the community. One of the key parts in your strategy that we've had the benefit of being a part of is really this lived experience. So capturing the lived experience of people that have been through some pretty significant life events, and relaying that lived experience to the broader community and the power that can have. Can you talk a bit about how you came to that realisation? I know it wasn't just through this engagement, but, and how the effect on the community that's potentially having.
No, we've been doing this for a long time, and the organisation was based on people impacted by road trauma, supporting other people impacted by road trauma, and we have a huge pool of volunteers that work with us, and a lot of them tell their personal stories. And the reason why we do that is because we know it makes a difference. So we know that if we have someone telling their personal story in a road trauma awareness seminar, that is going to be one of the key features of the seminar that makes people stop and listen and think about their own behaviour. So, for example, if we have a mum who is up there talking about how they lost their child, we often get our volunteers telling us that participants will come up to them at the end of the sessions when they're face-to-face and give them a hug and just say, I don't want my mum to be up there telling that story about me losing my life. So the lived experience is such an integral part of who we are. And one of the things that came out of the one conversation that we had during this strategic planning process was when we spoke to the magistrates. And one of the things that they said that would encourage magistrates to refer to our education programs was using lived experience. And one of our volunteers put her hand up and did just a video on her phone,
A raw video.
really raw video of
Yeah.
her on her phone where she talked about her experience of losing her mum. And we sent that to the magistrates, and they just basically said, that's it. That's the reason.
Yeah, that's wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. So, you know, but as I said, sharing lived experiences and personal stories is a huge part of who we are.
So, Bern, we hear a lot about empathy within organisations and within communities and within business, and empathy is such an important part of what we do, I believe. But I do see that there's sometimes, you know, the term is used and sometimes it's a bit glossed over of what it actually really means within organisations, within business and community. And I myself have learned personally a lot from you personally, the way empathy, you use empathy or you live empathy. And it'd be good to hear about, you know, your background coming from the counselling manager now into the CEO role, how you see empathy and the effect and the positive effect it can have.
Yeah. Look, I guess I'd be pretty concerned if an organisation like ours wasn't showing empathy. And I think the main thing about it for us is providing people with a space where they feel safe and not judged. And one of the biggest things for me about empathy is standing beside people, but never assuming I know what they're talking or what they're feeling. Never assume I know what they're feeling.
Yes.
Or that I understand, because unless I lived it, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
So it's really about, for me, it's very much about walking alongside people. And even with staff, though, I think we work hard and we don't always get it right. We're like, we're normal human beings and things happen, but we really work hard at supporting each other. And I guess that kind of leads into the culture stuff that we've been doing as well, where we work towards showing empathy for each other too. It's not just our clients, because I guess if we want to achieve the best possible outcomes for the people that we work with, we have to live and breathe what we say we're going to do with them.
Yes.
So I think it's really important for it to really be across the organisation.
Yeah, I've seen that personally. You know, working with you and your team, there are you know, perhaps with good intent, other organisations that talk, they have the banners and the lines, but perhaps then there's a bit of a gap between the actual actions and lived things on the ground. And I think the way you've described that, walking beside someone, is a beautiful way to put it, because you're not there's no overpowering, there's no pressure there. And I think also what you said there, for me, really captured it in terms of you're listening to what it's like in their experience. We sometimes say in human-centred design, we need to put ourselves in our customers' shoes. But I heard recently that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is actually listening to someone about what it's like to walk in their shoes. So there's a slight difference there for me, that what you've described there is we perhaps can't understand what someone has been through completely.
No.
But you create the space to really listen to that, and that's the difference.
Absolutely. And I've had some pretty difficult conversations with people who have lost their kids through road trauma, but really honest conversations about what works and what doesn't work. And it could be as simple as saying to someone who has lost someone, I'm sorry for your loss. Now, for some people that works. For other people, it's like, well, why are you sorry? You didn't do it.
Yes.
So really being mindful and not assuming anything. And really just that walking alongside for me is very much about just being where the person is with no expectation.
Yes.
And our experience and expertise as trauma and grief counsellors gives us the knowledge of the general experience as it might be, but never assuming that people need to be anywhere along that
Yes.
path at any particular time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
So it's just about, often I describe us as counsellors as expert companions. It's not a term that I coined, it's been around for a long time. So not everyone needs counselling. So it's really about being in that space with someone and just being there to support them and guide them, perhaps, when they don't know what to do next.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned culture there.
Yeah.
And culture is perhaps another one of those areas. It's this mystic thing at times, isn't it?
Sure
It's
is.
very hard to define. There's so many different definitions of what culture is.
Yeah.
I've seen it and felt it within your organisation, and I think that it's translated from, that empathy you have to your clients, then through the organisation. Are there things that you've learned this year? I know you've attended, McKinsey courses. So, that line of thinking from a culture perspective as well. And the year that's been, it's been so unknown and a fair bit of turmoil. Is there things that you think, you've learned and could share with other people around culture, around how to get that bond a bit stronger with teams?
I think certainly this year, with the challenges that we faced, has made us look at it further. But I think the main thing that did it for us this year was the strategic planning process. And I myself and the team were really determined to do both. If we're looking at our strategic plan, and we have all these amazing opportunities that we're going to be looking at and working through with our partners, if we didn't have the right culture supporting it, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think culture often sits, as a few words on the notice board or up in the kitchen, where nobody really looks at them.
Yeah.
And whilst you would expect people to be generally respectful and pleasant to work with, we never really drilled down into what it meant. So the culture for us is really about how do we best work together? What are our expectations of each other in our roles, in order for us to achieve the best outcomes for our clients? That's what we're there for.
Yes.
Yeah. Do I want everyone to be happy in the workplace? Yes. Do I want everyone to be satisfied? Of course. And get job satisfaction. But ultimately, we're there to serve the community. And our culture needs to support that. So I guess a lot of it is stripping back some of the ego and working towards how do we work best together. Yeah, I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I think that came across with the conversations with your partners and in the broader community. It came across, but you've been working with them for many years, and it was evident that they were learning a lot from your organisation, and it was reciprocal.
Definitely.
And I think that culture can span. Perhaps what I saw was beyond the four walls into your partner community, into your education programs. So I think it can be pretty powerful, can't it? If you can get it right, that people feel. I know I've heard you use the term. People feel like they belong.
Yeah.
As well, that can be pretty powerful. Then now rolling out your strategy, the conviction people have behind it, they seem to go together, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And a sense of belonging was hugely important this year for all of our staff, and a sense of connection. But for me, the culture is about, what makes people feel connected? What makes me feel like I belong might be different to you. So having the opportunity to talk about that as a group, as a staff group, what that did for us is really open our eyes to, wow, okay, it's different for you than it is for me.
Yes.
So what's important to you? What helps you? So those conversations were amazing. But what the strategic planning process did in relation to culture and working with people was it opened up the conversations for us to say, how do we best work together to achieve the better outcomes for our clients? So the culture then slipped into working with our external stakeholders. What does working together look like?
Yes, yeah.
And how do we do that best to help the people that we work with?
Yeah, and that's a beautiful way to put it. I think going back to what you mentioned at the start in terms of perhaps comparing it to some of the strategic planning approaches you've seen in the past, and we've all seen many. Do you feel that also then, as opposed to just taking the internal off-site approach, which is always, there's a place for that, isn't there? There's very much a place for it. But as opposed to that starting out externally to your organisation with your clients and partners, you felt like that is, from a clarity point of view, now as a CEO, you've got more clarity of really what direction and the purpose you're heading?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there are a couple of things, and this process that we've been to, we needed this right now. I feel that the organisation is on the precipice to kind of grow, or to really look at ourselves and say, who are we? Who do we want to be? Who do we need to be? What do our clients need? All those sorts of things. So we really needed to dig deep, and we've been able to do that.
Yes.
And we've come out with a whole list of opportunities to collaborate with partners, and we're going to work through those now, and that goes back to, I guess, the living and breathing plan. And this is what I love about this plan, is that we've been able to now walk away and develop individual work plans. And what that's done is it's broken down the opportunities that we've had that have come up out of all the conversations. And we've got really a clear set of things that we need to task that we want to work on. And we break it down into sort of 6-month blocks over the next 3 years. And for us, having that structure, I think what I've learnt, though, since being CEO is it's okay to fail too. So for us, it will be, there will be trial and error.
Yes.
And we'll be testing some of these things out, and some of them may not work. They may not be a good fit.
Yes.
But what it's doing is it's opening up the chance to try. And I think we have to be a little bit brave. Me too.
Yep.
And that's just a bit scary too.
Yes. It can be.
But we do have a really supportive board too, who are willing for us to say, okay, let's take the next step.
Yeah.
I think that's important too.
And your experience, well, this year and before, and then going forward with the testing of, in human-centred design, it's prototyping is a term that's used.
Yeah.
But you feel like that's allowed you to go quite broad.
Yeah.
And really get a really good read of what's going to be most important to the community, as opposed to what you think. Is that perhaps one thing you've got from it?
We're working on a set of opportunities that have come out of conversations with all our stakeholders. These aren't things that we've made up or thought maybe we should try. What it does for me as CEO, I guess, it gives me a real sense of direction.
Yes.
And perhaps it was also doing the McKinsey course as well, that it's okay to fail, but try.
Yeah. Yes.
And so the two things go hand in hand for me. It's sort of, we're not committing to taking on board everything. We're committing to explore them.
Yes.
And I think that's the key.
Yeah. And is that fair enough to say, as we're going into next year, 2021, there are still a lot of unknowns, isn't there, for so many people?
Sure.
So do you think that approach allows you then to adapt based on that? There could be more changes, we don't know. That approach allows you to adapt
Definitely.
to the external changes?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there'll be things that we take through from this year that we've done, including working from home. We're all going to be doing, taking that hybrid approach of doing a bit of both. But we'll also be taking through some of the things that we've had to do this year to survive as an organisation, as well as look at, I think she has made us become more brave because we've been able to see what we've been able to do in 2020. So perhaps the list of opportunities and business development, ideas aren't as scary as maybe they would have been if we hadn't had this year to really challenge the way we think about ourselves.
I think that's a key point that probably I haven't seen, that's a positive you referred to at the very start of the conversation was it's a clear positive, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
That it's allowed. And the last one for me to wrap it up, from a technology point of view, I think that's probably been one of the things you've managed to do in a very short period of time. Have gone from you were offering that online already as understood, but it's allowed you to really ramp up the way you deliver your education program across the state, and even to further deliver that interstate and further abroad than Victoria.
Yeah, well, they're the things we're going to look at. What can we do now that we know we can put the road trauma awareness seminars online? Feeling comfortable with counselling over Zoom or whatever platform we use. Whereas before, we might have been a bit reticent to try that too much. So I think this year has forced us to challenge our thinking, which has been good.
Yeah, great.